I recently told some friends of mine that I was not going to vote for who becomes president this year in the current presidential elections, and my friends lost their minds. They thought it was like some kind of cardinal sin to not vote for a president. And so in this video, I want to explain my rationale, my logic behind it, at least saying why I feel this way and why I'm choosing to do what I'm doing with my vote, which is abstaining from using it. Hi, my name's Tyus France. I make videos on personal development. In this video, I'm a little bit out on a limb because I'm going to be talking about politics, kinda. Really, I'm going to be talking about voting. I don't really care about politics too deeply, and this video is certainly not me condemning or condoning or suggesting you vote for any particular party or not suggesting you vote. This is really about the choice I made to not vote. And if you really want to vote, if you want to vote right now, you can do so by hitting the subscribe button, hitting the bell, hitting the notifications, hitting the like button, all that good stuff. It's a vote to let me know you like the content I'm putting out, and I'd appreciate that. Now, if you live outside of the United States, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about in this video might not seem pertinent because it's not your election. But in one sense, congratulations on having to participate in this crazy election we have taking place. On the other hand, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is not specific to the United States election. It's specific to all voting in general, so hopefully there's going to be a lot that everybody can take out of this. For the sake of inclusion, let's look at the different political systems that exist and that have been thought through and some of their inherent flaws. And we can start off by socialism and communism. Now, a lot of people will say those are very different things, and they are slightly different, but socialism is just basically communism light. It's like same great taste, half the calories. So the great thing about socialism is it's really wonderful. Communism really wonderful when everybody's voluntarily taking place in it. The problem is, as it gets bigger, it becomes more and more impossible for everybody to be voluntarily saying, hey, I'm in on this system. If you're born in that country, you don't get to say, I want to participate in this. The larger the system gets, the more people feel like their assets are being taken from them involuntarily. It ultimately leads to economic collapse. It's been shown over and over and over again. A not so fun fact is that socialism and communism are responsible for the most amount of preventable human deaths in history. So that's kind of dark and sad. Anyways, that's what that system is. Next one we're going to look at is capitalism. Capitalism is more of a means of production than it is a government system. However, when people talk about capitalism in the context of government, what they're really talking about is crony capitalism or cronyism. And that's when people can buy a certain position, or they can use their influence, their money, their sway to influence laws that benefit their business or their profitability in life. So this is obviously a bad thing when people take advantage by using power and money to really take advantage of the poor in order to gain their own power and wealth. That's what cronyism is. And it's unfortunate that it's tied in with capitalism because capitalism has produced, iPhones and computers and, some of the greatest innovations in the world have come from capitalism. But when it comes to crony capitalism, that is a government type system and it is inherently massively flawed. Authoritarianism is when you have a ruler. So forms of this would be totalitarianism, monarchy, or fascism. I'm sure there's others, but those are the ones that come to mind right now. And this is obviously a bad thing for the masses because power is so consolidated with the ruler or this small select ruling class. There is an interesting argument for totalitarianism or for authoritarianism to be successful, and that is that if you are in control of a country or an entire area or whatever, and you're going to be passing that on to your heirs, you have a more vested interest in its success for the long term because it's your legacy, as opposed to if you have a short term where you're in office for 4 years or 2 years or 8 years, you only really care about the success, or you're only incentivized to care about the success during that short time frame. After that time frame, you're not really incentivized to care about it anymore. So there is an argument that authoritarianism is a potentially good form of government, but if you are one of the millions or the minions that aren't in control, you obviously lack a great deal of freedom, and that's why it's inherently flawed. On the other end of that spectrum is anarchy, minarchy, libertarianism, anarcho-capitalism. All of these philosophies, belief systems, governments, they essentially encourage the idea of having the smallest government possible or no government at all. Now, this system provides the greatest amount of freedom for the individual, so the masses all have tremendous freedom. In fact, potentially unlimited freedom. The problem with this is when you're dealing with creating laws or trying to create a unified movement of people endorsing one type of thing. So let's say you're trying to create national defense. It's often very difficult to get everybody on the same page when there's no vote system, there's no collected income that is going toward one cause. It's very hard to get that cause to have any momentum when everybody's doing everything voluntarily. The point of all this is to show that every system has its flaws, and that is not really a reason not to vote. In fact, it might be a great reason to vote, specifically because if you're voting, you might be able to change the system. Now, if I'm wrong about all of these systems having flaws, if I miss something here, let me know why, let me know how, and leave it in the comments below. I'll check them out, I'll read them. I'm very curious. But we have these rights in the United States, in the Constitution, the 15th Amendment, the 19th Amendment, the 24th Amendment, the 26th Amendment, all of these pertain to voting. We have a lot of rights and freedoms around voting, and we're encouraged deeply to vote, whether it's these campaigns like Rock the Vote, or whether it's just what you see in the media, everyone's saying you must vote. It's not that the system is flawed that I don't want to vote. The reason I don't want to vote really comes down to 5 things, and let's go through those. The first reason is that most of the states in the country are already predetermined. We know how the delegates there are going to vote, and that's because states are either predominantly Republican or predominantly Democrat. So for example, if you happen to be a Republican, but you live in California or Connecticut or Maryland or Illinois, like those are already predetermined. And similarly, if you're a Democrat that happens to live in, let's say, I've got notes, Alabama, Idaho, Kansas, Montana, well, the state's already the other direction. Your vote is inherently wasted. The way these are divvied up and divided up, like your vote is not going to matter because the state is already predominantly the other way. Now, speaking of divided up, that brings me to my second reason, which is gerrymandering. Now, a lot of people have heard the term gerrymandering, but not a lot of people know exactly what it is because it's kind of hard to explain. So let me take a second to give this a college try on explaining what gerrymandering is. Let's say that we have 50 voters, and we're going to say that 30 of those 50 voters are going to be voting for a fictional yellow candidate. The other 20 voters are going to be voting for a fictional purple candidate. So this is our voting pool. Now, we're going to divide them up into districts because we think that's going to make things a little bit more efficient, right, in tallying up the votes. Now, if we divide those districts up like this, what we end up with is 3 districts that are all for the yellow candidate and 2 districts that are all for the purple candidate. So we get a vote of 3 votes for yellow, 2 votes for purple, which would actually be the same ratio that we would be looking for if we were getting the popular vote. But it's not the only way that you could divide up these districts. You could also equally divide up the districts this way. And in this way of dividing them up, the districts are the same size, but if you count the votes and tally the votes together, you'll find that every single one of the 5 districts overwhelmingly is voting for the yellow candidate. So rather than getting a 3-2 vote, you're now getting all 5 votes for the yellow candidate. Now, in both of these examples, the winner has been the yellow candidate, which also matches the popular vote. So it seems like it'd be fine. It's not like you're swaying the end result. But let's get creative. What if we divided this up a different way? This way. Now, I know this looks a little bit more confusing, but if you total up all the voters in each district, they're the same. They're balanced districts. They're just divided up in an interesting way. Now, if you were to average the votes, suddenly the purple vote has 3 votes, and the yellow vote only has 2, which means even though it's not the popular vote, the purple vote has just won the election. This is called gerrymandering, and it's one more way that people can manipulate the vote. Now, these districts are divided up by those who are in power. So ultimately, somebody in power can decide or at least sway the vote based off of where they draw districts. The third reason I'm not voting is because of how few choices you really have. In Magic, there's this thing called Magician's Choice, or a force. Now, let me give you a simple example of it. Let's say I've got 2 pieces of paper, and on one of those pieces of paper, I draw a green X. Now I want you to pick the one that has the green X in it, right? So we mix them up, and let's say you pick this one. Well, I got you to pick the one that I wanted you to. But the truth is, no matter what you had selected, you would have gotten the green X because ultimately they're exactly the same. So similar to that silly little trick, it seems to me that the candidates, despite the fact that they say they're completely different from their opponent, they really seem to be doing the exact same thing. We end up feeling like we're voting for something different, we end up getting the same thing. So for example, they say that they care a great deal about the economy, but ultimately, they're both fiscally irresponsible. They say they're going to stop wars. Ultimately, those wars continue. They say that they're going to improve our civil rights, and yet we end up in greater civil unrest than we ever did with the candidate before. So it always seems to be getting worse, and we seem to think that we're getting a different kind of candidate in place, when in reality, it seems to just be the same thing to me every single time. That brings me to my fourth reason, which is delegates, superdelegates specifically. When we vote, our vote gets represented by our delegates, and they make a vote for us, essentially. But superdelegates can vote for anybody they want, and they represent 15% of the vote. Literally, thousands and thousands and thousands of people are represented by every single superdelegate. The Center for Responsive Politics reported that 80% of superdelegates, their vote could be predicted based off of the campaign contributions that were given to them, which means that votes are literally being purchased by the rich and powerful, meaning ultimately your vote doesn't matter. Our current system of voting is both archaic and unreliable. Mail-in voting has been criticized for being potentially flawed as far as people cheating the system, or that the system is just too difficult to use. Voting in person is plagued with concerns of hacking or physical tampering or hanging chads. I mean, we've seen all of that stuff. According to the National Conference of State Legislators, over 50% of the United States does not require identification to vote, which means that people could vote multiple times, or they could not be eligible to vote, or they might not even be U.S. citizens and have the ability to vote. What's crazy about this to me is that we can do our banking online. In fact, we can do almost everything online, and yet we can't vote online. We can't seem to do that one thing in a secure manner when everything else that we do seems to be secure. I don't get it. There are solutions to these problems. What we need is a greater pool of candidates for us to vote on. We need simplified procedures and policies, and we need an incentive to vote for the candidate that we support rather than the lesser of two evils. One such solution is called ranked choice voting. Here's how that works. Let's say that you have 3 candidates. In our current system, you just cast your vote for which candidate you support. But in a ranked choice vote, you rank them from first to last. Now, when you go to tally those votes, that's when this gets really, really interesting. So if one person has the majority, if they have over 50% of the votes, that's the candidate that wins. But let's say that between those 3 candidates, nobody has more than 50%. Then what you do is they take the last place candidate and they remove them from the running. They take the second choice from the candidate that was removed and add that to the total of the remaining candidates. This continues until one candidate has over 50%. A system like this would dramatically reduce smear campaigns because you're not only trying to get the vote of your own supporters, but you're trying to become the second place vote for everybody else's supporters. So there's no reason to run smear campaigns if you intend on being the second choice of all of them. There's nothing inherently noble about voting in a flawed system. I'm not entirely sure why there seems to be this religious fervor that everyone has to vote. A lot of people don't really feel informed well enough to make a vote. And wouldn't it be better if those people didn't feel pressure to go vote for what they're not informed about voting? Wouldn't it be better if we let people that are researching this and make an informed decision have that vote? Now, obviously, it would be better if we got everybody really, really informed. But shouldn't the people that are uninformed be able to opt out from this without feeling social pressure? Maybe the biggest issue is that people are voting based off of party preference or based off of the lesser of two evils. Now, voting based off of a candidate because of the party is a form of tribalism as far as I'm concerned. It's collectivism. It's like voting for a team on sports. It doesn't actually make sense for the person's policies. Now, voting for the lesser of two evils is still a vote for evil. What I would suggest is you find a candidate that you align with the most and you vote in favor of them. If you don't feel informed, don't let somebody pressure you into making a vote for somebody you don't know about, you haven't learned about, and you don't align with. regardless of which celebrity or media outlet tells you otherwise. I want to thank you for watching my videos. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, the bell, all that good stuff. It really helps me out and it makes me know that people are watching, which I appreciate. And I make these videos on personal development, so this is kind of a one-off. But if you like personal development, if you're always trying to create the best version of you, or at least get as close as you can, then I hope you watch my other videos, and I hope to see you soon.